This was shot at ISO 12,800 and this one was shot at ISO 1000. So why do they look the same? What's up guys, welcome back to a new video. It is another beautiful day here in Bali. It's actually not, it's been raining for like 4 days now. I'm so annoyed and I'm so sad. I miss the sun. Anyways guys, if you're new here, thank you for tuning in. In this channel we talk about filmmaking, video editing, color grading, travel, all of these things. So if you do enjoy this video, please leave a like and subscribe down below. So there is a small misunderstanding that whenever you're in a low light situation, you always have to lift the ISO because you have to expose to the right, you have to try and get the plus 1.5, plus 1.7 on your little exposure meter. People don't often talk about it, that's actually wrong, especially if you're trying to represent a specific style or a specific low light situation. It all depends by the environment you're in, it all depends by how moody you want the shot to be. It all depends if you're outside, it all depends if you're inside. There is so many factors that you have to think about and actually understand before understanding. Just, you know, put the ISO up and we'll figure it out in post. We're actually so lucky to live in an era where we have literally a camera like this one, the Sony a7S III, that has a dual base ISO and S-Log3, which means that I can lift this to 12,800 and it will be like a perfectly clean image. But that's not always the right thing, as I said before, because when we shoot outside during the day, we always are exposed for the highlights. So why, when we're shooting low light or when we're shooting a night scene or anything like that, we always try and raise that exposure to match to the right? Because that's never going to happen, because obviously your exposure meter, it's going to read the whole scene, which means the shadows are always super dark and you're actually never getting to that plus 1.5, 1.7 or 2. So how do we get a nice exposure at night without just lifting the ISO? Because the ISO, yes, 12,800, it is a perfectly clean image, but still doesn't look as good as ISO 800 or 1000, right? The quality still misses a little bit. So how do we get a perfect image? And there is one trick, which is just look at your highlights. All you gotta do is expose for your highlights, which is exactly what you do during the day. Your camera is gonna tell you how the whole image will look when you're trying to expose something. And during the day, if you expose by 1 or 2 stops, that's usually good enough. But that's because your whole image is bright because it's daylight. But if you're doing the same at night, you're never gonna get there because your whole scene is actually dark and you want it to be dark. So all there is to do is expose for the highlights. For my Sony a7S III, for example, I have my Zebra setting to 94 plus, which is where the highlights start clipping. And by doing this, I can make sure that whenever I shoot anything at night or low light, I just expose just before they start clipping. If I see them clipping, I step down. It doesn't matter how dark the image looks. I always try to expose for the highlights because that's what keeps the image looking natural and looking nice and sharp. Now, this is all depending by the scene that you're trying to shoot. If you're trying to shoot a very moody scene where like it's blue light, there's literally no external light apart from the sky. In that case, it's a bit different. In that case, I usually prefer to shoot at 12,800 just to get a brighter image overall, a cleaner image, and something that I can play with. Something like colors of the sunset shining behind a silhouette or something like that. Usually in these occasions, I always use 12,800 just because this allows me to save everything from the shot. Because I know exactly that whenever I'm gonna edit in post, I'm gonna take the shadows and crash them down, which means there is no noise in the shadows and the highlights are nice and perfectly exposed. But if I'm shooting anything else, like a city at night or whatever that is, I always keep my ISO between 1000 to 2000 max. I said 2000 max because after 2000, then it starts to get a bit grainy, the quality goes down, and then you almost want to just go to 12,800 then. If I can keep it below 2000 on Sony a7S III, usually the image is nice and sharp, a little bit of the noise in post, and we're good. Another thing that you have to remember is when shooting at night, you want to shoot with a fast lens. What is a fast lens? Maybe I should actually get one. All right, here we go. So this is an example of a fast lens. This is a Sigma 85mm 1.4. With this lens, I can literally shoot pretty much anything in low light and it will look incredible. The reason is because I can step down this off as well. I can step down this one because this is 2.8 lens, this Sigma 2470 I have right on. And this is a 1.4, which means I get like, what, 1, 2, 3, 4 stop of light more, which means that if a scene is dark, that I can only shoot at like 3,000 or 4,000 ISO with this specific lens I have right there. With this one, I can still keep it around 2,000, which means this is the best lens for the shot. I only have, unfortunately, this 85mm at 1.4, but I have a Helios 44-2, which is a 58mm lens at f2, so it's kind of in the middle. And all the rest of my lenses are f2.8, which is probably the most common, I guess. So what I'm trying to say is that you have to plan ahead and you have to know what kind of scenes you're trying to shoot, and you have to plan your gear, right? You can't go on a shoot and just think that your normal lens is gonna work for everything. Yes, most of the time it does, but if it doesn't, you have to step up your game and get fastest lenser for low light. I talked about noise before, and there's something you should know about noise and noise reduction in post-production. Noise reduction in post-production. So most software don't actually have a good noise reduction included aside from DaVinci Resolve, just in case you're thinking to, you know, switch again. It's best software there. Anyways, DaVinci Resolve has such a great noise reduction tool inside that it makes everything else looks crap. So DaVinci has a pretty wide range of noise reduction tools, but usually what I use is only the spatial noise reduction, just because it's the most simple and the fastest and the less heavy on the GPU. So all I do is usually just go on the noise reduction and add between 5 and 10 of the Luma, which is the overall noise reduction. And then depending on the image, if I push the ISO to 1600 to 2000, usually you'll start to see that the image doesn't look sharp, or there is like a bit of a noise bending. I don't know, there's something wrong with the image. And what it is the RGB noise. This noise is everywhere in pretty much every shot, probably ever shoot, you just don't see it. And as soon as they lift the ISO, you will see it. So how do you get rid of this? You just go into the noise reduction, the spatial noise reduction, and then you just remove a little bit of the chroma, which is the color noise. And once you do that, obviously, depending on your scene, depending on your camera, depending on what you shot, usually between 10 to 15, it's more than enough. You don't want to overdo this because then your image will just get too soft. And as a last tip, I recently started using a monitor on top of my camera to shoot everything I'm shooting, even these YouTube videos, and it has changed the way I shoot. It has made me a better filmmaker by far. And the reason is because this Sony camera, or any camera you're shooting on, actually have such a tiny screen that it's so hard to actually see what you're trying to shoot. And especially in low light situations, you're trying to boost your ISO, you don't understand what's going on, you don't have the right gamma correction, you just don't understand if it's gonna be a good shot or not shot, it's too dark, it's too bright, it's very hard to understand. With a monitor like this one, I use the Fieldworld LUT 5.5, I think it's called, and it's got integrated LUTs and gamma corrections, which means I always have the S-Log3 correction on top, which means I can always see exactly what my shot is gonna look like. And it's game changing because, especially in low light, I just put my monitor on and I just understand, first of all, what's on focus and what's not in focus, if I'm manual focusing, or it's just easier to look around and see the highlights are well exposed or not well exposed. So it's just an easier process overall. So if you have the ability, if you have the budget, if you have it already, definitely use a monitor all the time because it will step up your video by a million. And also the framing, it's, you can just frame everything so much better with a monitor and it looks better. You can charge more. The bigger your rig, the more you can charge. To sum this up, it's all about the specific style of the video you're going for and the specific camera you're shooting on, the lens you're shooting on, and just to understand every single step of the production when shooting in low light. I rarely go into a low light shoot without knowing what I'm gonna shoot, without doing a bit of a pre-production, unless it's just like I don't know, I'm going to a market in a city in, I don't know, Hong Kong or Bangkok, and then I'm just shooting as I go. But for most actual production, I always look into what's the light, can I bring extra light, can I work with the light that's there, and just try and understand, even before going to the place, just trying to understand how everything works, and if I need a faster lens, if I need you know, extra light and everything. So hope you guys learned something new from this video, and I'm gonna go back to Huh. I see blue sky. I think it's happening. Okay, maybe I'm gonna go for a walk on the beach. See you guys in the next video. Thanks again for sticking around.